The chandeliers sparkled like constellations above the ballroom, every crystal refracting light across polished marble floors. Guests arrived in gowns that brushed the ground like flowing rivers of silk, men in tuxedos shaking hands with smiles that hid their calculations. The annual Prescott Foundation Gala was not just another fundraiser. It was the event of the year. The kind where connections were born, fortunes expanded, and reputations either gleamed or cracked under scrutiny. Alexander Prescott, heir to the Prescott Empire and reluctant billionaire, stood at the base of the grand staircase. He wore a navy tuxedo tailored to perfection, though his expression betrayed the discomfort of a man who wished he were anywhere else. For Alexander, galas weren't about joy, they were obligations, polished cages where he performed his role as society demanded. The board expected him to charm investors, the media wanted a headline, and his late father's legacy loomed like a shadow reminding him of expectations unmet. He adjusted his cufflinks, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Catherine cancelled. Sorry. No date tonight. Alexander's jaw tightened. Catherine, the socialite he had convinced to appear as his partner for the night, had apparently found something better to do or someone better to impress. Alone, he knew, the press would swarm, tabloids would speculate, and whispers about his coldness would grow louder. The Prescott heir without warmth, without charm, without a real life outside business. A machine disguised as a man. That was when his gaze caught on someone entirely out of place in the ballroom. Jacob, the janitor, stood at the far end of the hall, his grey uniform neatly pressed though its faded fabric betrayed years of wear. He was wheeling a mop bucket toward the staff corridor, head slightly bowed as though to shrink into invisibility. He was the kind of man guests never looked at twice, though he had worked in the building longer than most of them had owned their fortunes. 52 years old, with streaks of silver running through his dark hair, Jacob carried himself with quiet dignity, even when stooping to scrub the floor. On instinct more than reason, Alexander called out, "Youth heir, stop." Jacob froze, startled. He glanced around to confirm the billionaire was speaking to him, then cautiously approached. "Yes, sir." His voice was calm but carried the weight of someone accustomed to being overlooked. Alexander lowered his voice, conscious of wondering eyes. "I need a favor." "A ridiculous one." "Just pretend to be my date tonight." For a moment, Jacob thought he had misheard. The mop handle nearly slipped from his grip. "I beg your pardon, I don't have time to explain," Alexander said. His words were clipped, but there was an edge of desperation behind them. "The press is watching. Investors are watching. If I show up alone, they'll smell blood. You'll a broken bar fit the role. Just for tonight." "Pretend." Jacob's brows furrowed. "I'm a janitor, sir. I clean up after galas, I don't attend them." "Exactly why it will work," Alexander replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his own words. "No one will expect it. They'll be intrigued. You'll steal the spotlight simply by being unexpected. I'll handle the rest." Jacob studied the billionaire's face. There was arrogance there, yes, but beneath it he glimpsed something else, a flicker of loneliness, perhaps, or the fatigue of a man tired of masks. Against every instinct, Jacob nodded slowly. "If you're serious, I'll do it. But only if you promise one thing: don't treat me like I'm invisible." Alexander blinked, then gave the slightest smile. "Deal." Within half an hour, Jacob had been whisked to the styling room, where a frantic assistant produced a tuxedo from the wardrobe department. It was a few inches too short in the sleeves, but it transformed him nonetheless. His calloused hands looked strangely elegant against black satin cuffs. He stared into the mirror and barely recognized himself. For the first time in decades, he wasn't just the man cleaning up after the party. He was part of it. When they entered the ballroom together, a hush rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Guests whispered. Alexander Prescott, the untouchable billionaire, had brought a broken bar, a janitor. Some thought it must be a statement. Others suspected scandal. The reporters leaned forward, eager to capture the story. Alexander slipped easily into charm, introducing Jacob with deliberate confidence. "This is Jacob, my companion for the evening." His tone left no room for mockery. By standing beside him with such certainty, he elevated Jacob in the eyes of the room. At first Jacob felt every stare pierce his skin, but soon he realized something extraordinary. The power of pretense worked both ways. By simply being there, by holding his head high, he commanded a kind of respect he had never known. And when he spoke softly, sincerely, people listened. One guest asked about his work, clearly fishing for gossip. Instead of hiding, Jacob answered with honesty. "I've been maintaining this building for over 20 years. I've cleaned up after every gala, polished these floors until they gleamed. Tonight is the first time I've seen them from this side of the room." The crowd chuckled, but it wasn't unkind. There was admiration in their smiles, as though his humility revealed something they had all forgotten. In a room of masks, he was unfiltered truth. As the evening unfolded, Jacob's presence began to reshape the gala itself. He reminded people of their own beginnings, their own humanity. Investors found themselves confessing childhood dreams to him. Socialites laughed with genuine warmth rather than rehearsed wit. Even the hardened journalists softened their questions. Alexander watched with astonishment. He had invited Jacob as a shield, but instead, Jacob had become the heart of the evening. For once, Alexander wasn't the headline. Jacob was, and strangely, Alexander felt a broken bar relieved. The night reached its climax when the host announced the silent auction. Priceless art, rare wines, luxury vacations all paraded across the stage. Bidders raised paddles with careless flicks of the wrist. But when a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth was announced, the room's energy dimmed. Few seemed interested. Jacob, remembering the children he had seen lingering outside the gates of the foundation, spoke without hesitation. "I can't bid like the rest of you," he said, voice steady though his hands trembled. "But I can promise time. I'll mentor. I'll clean classrooms if it helps. Every child deserves a chance to see more than the floor beneath them." The room fell silent. Then, slowly, applause swelled. What no amount of money had stirred, Jacob's words had ignited. Inspired, others pledged donations, and not out of vanity, but genuine conviction. That single moment raised more for the scholarship fund than all the luxury items combined. Alexander felt a lump rise in his throat. He had spent years perfecting deals, mastering negotiations, but he had never witnessed someone move a crowd so effortlessly. Jacob hadn't stolen the gala, he had saved it. When the night drew to a close, Alexander walked Jacob to the staff corridor where the mop bucket still waited, forgotten. "You've done more for me tonight than I can repay," Alexander said quietly. "More than saving face. You reminded me what this is all supposed to mean." Jacob smiled faintly. "You didn't need me to pretend, Mr. Prescott. You just needed someone real." The words struck deeper than Alexander expected. For the first time, he wondered if the empire he had inherited was less about profits and more about people, something his father had perhaps known but never spoken aloud. The following weeks changed everything. Articles about the gala didn't focus on Alexander's fortune or business strategies. They told the story of the janitor who became the guest of honor, the man whose authenticity redefined a room full of power. Investors called Alexander with newfound respect, not for his wealth, but for his courage to embrace the unexpected. Employees at Prescott Enterprises whispered with pride that their CEO valued every person, no matter their title. And Jacob, though he returned to his mop and bucket, carried himself with a renewed sense of worth. He was invisible no longer. One afternoon, Alexander visited him in the quiet halls after hours. "Jacob," he said, "I don't want this to be a one-time thing. I want you to work with me, not as a janitor, though you've done that with honor, but as someone who sees what others miss. Someone who reminds us of the humanity behind the numbers. Will you?" Jacob hesitated, glancing at the bucket by his side. Then he looked at Alexander, who for once wasn't speaking as a billionaire, but as a man searching for meaning. Slowly, Jacob nodded. And so began a partnership no one could have predicted, the billionaire and the janitor. Not as a failed Section aid, not as a pretense, but as equals striving towards something greater. The gala had been just one night, but its lesson echoed long after, that kindness could disarm the proud, that selflessness could inspire the powerful, and that sometimes the smallest voice in the room could be the one that changed everything.